Hi there. Welcome to an ITV special edition where we are creating a community dialogue series as an opportunity for growth and bring the community together in greater understanding of relationships with our men, women, young children, and especially our youths. In highlighting CADVA's upcoming program on youth awareness and our bullying campaign with Guyana's local NGO, IMRAC, and the Miss World Guyana organization, we will be joining forces in Trinidad with other youth groups from August 5th and ending on International Day, which ends on August 12th. This will take place at Napa in Trinidad, Port-au-Prince, Trinidad, which is the National Academy of the Performing Arts, as many youths of Trinidad will come together to raise their voices for change. I'm your host, Dianne Madray. In a two-part series, today we will begin to dialogue on the topic of bullying and social media, the effects on youth. It has been noted that there is increasing evidence that the internet and social media can influence suicide-related behavior. Question then is, does the influence poses any significant risk to our children and youth who dialogue daily on one of the largest social media company whose share happens to soar more than 30% last Thursday, July 25th, since the company went public on back in last May. But let's rewind for a moment and go back a few years, especially for our Caribbean community, Guyana in particular. There were two particular cases that hit the headlines internationally. One here in the United States and one particularly in Guyana. The one that I'm going to just mention briefly about on the Guyana case because of the topic we're discussing today. And many of you will remember this case, which goes back from 2009. This is the 23-year-old Aliyah Bulkan who jumped off the Kaichor Falls. That's correct, folks. Aliyah Bulkan jumped off the Kaichor Falls in 2009. During that time, rumors have begun spreading, indicating that there was a sex video of her had surfaced and had begun to circulate among many people in Guyana. Not much has been said about this case since. Not enough evidence was available for total disclosure. Another victim of what we could call cyberbullying, just like Aliyah, would be that hit international headlines now in 2010. There are many other cases aside of the two cases that I'm mentioning, but just highlighting these two particular cases. This particular case happened right here in the United States. This was 18-year-old Tyler Clementi, a freshman at Rutgers University in New Jersey. Tyler jumped off the George Washington Bridge. Tyler's privacy was invaded when his college roommate viewed him in an intimate act and invited others to view this online, broadcasting live images. Well, folks, today we will begin to discuss both negative and positive influences of social media as we open this dialogue with a licensed clinical social worker. Here with us today, Eric Stone. Eric has done extensive work with children and adolescents. Eric has also worked internationally with the U.S. Peace Corps in Africa and Kenya. We'll hear a little bit more about Eric and the work that he does. Eric, I want to thank you for joining us here on ITV for this particular program and the efforts that it would begin to create. Excuse me.
Thank you.
But here's the thing I want to start off with, Eric. And over the weeks, we've been dialoguing about many things on this particular topic, and I just must say I appreciate your efforts and the work that we will end up doing in the future and what we're trying to create. And both of us have a passion for youth development. So, and because of the research, looking into it a little bit more, I think I too have become sensitized to many of the youths that I'm working with. And so I wanted to say, like, you have a BlackBerry, correct?
I do.
Okay.
Which is now outdated, actually. Now it's iPhone.
Okay.
iPhone is the thing. My BlackBerry is outdated.
Well,
but 10 years ago,
yeah.
I had a flip phone.
Okay.
And 11 years ago, I had a answering machine.
Well, the thing about it is that I remember a few years back when everyone had BlackBerries. Mm-hmm. I didn't. I had exactly what you just said, the flip
Yes.
phone. So many of my friends and colleagues had the BlackBerry. Mm-hmm. I had, like you said, the flip phone. And what I observed was many of the conversations, you know, while texting or responding to message, they would have a conversation either with you or with someone else or within a group, mm-hmm. and you'll see the groups there, and there's one particular person with that BlackBerry who is just like texting or communicating. Now, this is just my personal opinion. As a society, I feel that this added technology that has been created, we have become desperate, where we can't go anywhere anymore without taking these electronic objects that obscure and block human contact of social activities. Now, Eric, here's my question to you. Do you believe, and I know this could be a personal opinion as well, has social media today robbed us of our humanity? Because I know we've discussed some topics on the humanity. So, would you say...
I wouldn't say it has robbed us of our humanity. I definitely think it's added a lot to the world and to the way we see the world and how we process the world and how we connect and communicate. I think that it has certainly done a lot of wonderful and positive things for human beings, for humanity, quote unquote. But I think that, you know, with any new invention and with anything, there's always the other side to it. And I think that it depends on how it's used and what it's used for. And especially with young people and with you know, children and with teenagers, and particularly young teenagers who now in 2013, let's say, any teenager now in 2013 grew up entrenched in this world, right? Like, this is the world that they know. We kind of came of age in it. I mean, when I was a teenager, there was, I think we still had not rotary phones, but we had those, you know, phones that you walked around the house with, but certainly not BlackBerries and certainly not internet and anything like that. I remember when I wanted information about something, I would have to go pull this big Encyclopedia Britannica off the shelf and try to find the right page, you know, to get the information. Whereas now, kids can just go on Google and find out whatever they want, which is, I think, a wonderful thing.
So one of the things that we want to ensure that the audience is aware of, that even though we're talking about social media and the effects on our children and youth, that there are positive and negative aspects to it.
Exactly.
So we want to ensure that our audience are aware of that. Now, Eric, the fact that we're focusing today, and this is going to also be a two-part presentation. This is just giving an overview to help our audience to understand what the social media and the effects on our children are all about. The question I wanted to ask you also is, because you dealt with a lot of youths, and so have I, but from your perspective as a mental health, how do you see the influence of social media and the internet as it relates to our young children and teens today compared to when we were kids growing up? You know, I mean, I know you touched on that a little bit earlier, but
I think the significant difference is that it's much more immediate and that it's much more instant. And that, you know, you can have 10,000 friends on Facebook, but how many of those people are really your friends? You know, how many people could you really call if you were in crisis or if you really need help with something? I think that there's a little bit of with the kind of Facebook world and the YouTube world, there's a little bit of fantasy around it, kind of like a fantastical world that you can kind of escape into. And although it can provide you amazing amounts of information and it can certainly enlighten you, it can also put you into a little bit of a fantasy world. You know, you can have all of these friends, but it's really behind a screen.
Right.
And I think that's the difference. When we were kids, it was immediate. You know, it was right there.
It was that contact, that human contact that we talked about earlier. Now, Eric, with all of this in mind, and we had a dialogue just a few days ago regarding a posting on Facebook, and one of the things that came up in our conversation was, do you think the message got lost in the translation? So now, are we looking at, with this social media and the internet, is the message getting lost in the translation, you know, through the social media?
Well, I think
use of social media.
I think it depends on what the purpose of who's using it and why they're using it. I have worked with a lot of children and teenagers who will use social media, who will use Facebook as a cry for help. Right. You know, they're depressed, they are feeling lost in the world, they feel that they don't have any friends, they need help. And so they will actually use sometimes Facebook or YouTube, they'll post videos as a cry for help. But if the people on the other side of that are not in tune with that, there's a great possibility that that could be missed. For example, I worked with a girl, I think she was about 13 years old, and she put something on Facebook where she was saying, you know, there's really no point in living anymore, I don't have any friends, I'm depressed, something like that. And it got 15 likes, you know, by friends.
Right.
But no one really kind of put two and two together that this young woman was severely depressed. And so that's where things can get lost in the translation. The other ways in which it can be lost in translation is that people can also use that as an opportunity to retaliate and to bully, online. If someone is vulnerable on the internet or they express themselves in some way, that also does leave room for, potential bullying. People can backlash, by putting very hateful and negative comments on Facebook or on YouTube, if you post a video, which can be very devastating to children. And I think what I really would like to get the message out is to talk briefly about the power of words and the power of language and how we teach our children to understand language and to appreciate it. I think that words sometimes are overlooked in our society and language. Words can be used to uplift people, they can be used to enlighten, but they can also be used to destroy, to humiliate, to shame. And to me, words are like weapons sometimes and can be like little bullets, they can go into you and they can hurt you.
But remember, it's like what you had said when we were having this conversation, that, what's that saying?
Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And the first time I heard that, I think I was in 2nd grade, and I was on the playground, and I remember this like 30-something years later. Kids were like saying something to me, and I remember telling the teacher, and she said, well, always remember, sticks and stones will break my bones, and names will never hurt me. And I remember thinking, I don't believe that, because names do hurt, and they can be very harmful. My saying in that is sticks and stones will break my bones, and names will destroy me. Names will really devastate me.
Well, I guess for some people you really have, because I've seen, like when I step back sometimes and I look at the dialogue on Facebook with either friends of friends, and some of the response, whether it's in a group or one-on-one,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just amazing that sometimes we forget, the person that we might be speaking to, what they might be going through.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And how hurtful it could be. But coming on that, Eric, in our discussions and our dialogues over the last couple of weeks also, one of the things I remember you mentioned was, and I'd like for you to explain this to our audience, especially our parents. Mm-hmm. You said, quote, parents have to help children to be grounded in reality. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yes, I really, really believe that. I think that, you'd asked earlier the difference between our generation, and teenagers now. I think the difference is that, and I'm not just talking about social media, I'm talking about all media. For example, reality shows. Anything that children are exposed to right now is a little bit fantastical or could possibly be fantastical. They don't always know what's real and what isn't real. For example, reality shows are not really reality. There's not much reality in reality shows, and what a lot of these shows promote is they promote humiliation, and they promote even levels of bullying, fighting and kind of humiliating other people. What I think parents really need to look out for is to help their children understand the difference between reality and fantasy, to help them understand that what they're seeing on TV that is marketed as reality isn't always reality, and what they're seeing and experiencing online or through the social media is not always total reality. For example, having relationships with people. I worked with a lot of kids who, they'll break up with their girlfriends or boyfriends on text, or, they'll say these really nasty things to each other, and for nothing. I had a girl one time who, she had a best friend, she talked about her all the time, and then one day she stopped talking about her, and I said, how come you don't talk about your friend anymore? She said, oh, I unfriended her. And, I said, what do you mean you unfriended her? And she said, oh, she said she didn't like my makeup or something. So I unfriended her on Facebook. She's not my friend anymore. And that's the difference. That is not total reality. And if children grow up with the sense that they can just break up with somebody on text or delete somebody because they were slightly uncomfortable with them, that can develop actually future problems in young adulthood in terms of being able to navigate and negotiate conflict, at work or in other kinds of relationships. You can't just cut somebody off, but the internet oftentimes allows that, unfriending people or the text world.
Right. So that's important. So basically, you're also saying that parents play a particular role,
absolutely,
with the relationships that you know, they develop within the home and with their children. So what would you say in terms of the goal would be for parents involved with the kids, you know, in terms of working with them to encourage the parents what they can do?
Okay, I think that's a great question.
And also, two-part with that, what would be an appropriate cutoff age, would you say? Like, you know, a child of, let's say, 11, 12 versus a child of 16, 17, you know, a cutoff age. Would you encourage that to be?
Cutoff age for what?
Like for some of the things that they're viewing and interacting with, you know, with social media.
I think it kind of, that question is kind of in many ways is very much connected.
Right.
I think there's a few things parents can do, and I think the first thing, I'll just talk to the parents for a second. The first thing is to not be in denial about what your children are exposed to. If you think your children haven't seen it or haven't done it, they probably have. And I personally don't think that there's any way you can really remove any of this media from them. I've worked with parents who try to punish their children by taking the computer away or the iPhone away. But the reality is, as soon as they leave that house, they're re-exposed to it again in some other way.
Find a way.
You cannot hide your children from this stuff. So I think what would be beneficial for parents to do is to recognize that it is a reality and that there's no escaping it. But oftentimes parents, especially from, let's say, other cultures or maybe people who don't speak English, they are intimidated by it. And they don't want any part of it. They don't even want to look at any of this stuff because they don't quite understand it themselves. So I would say to parents, don't deny that what's going on with your kids, but try to understand it. If you don't understand it, ask your children. They'll teach you. They'll teach you how to use Facebook and the internet and all of this stuff. And you can have more of a dialogue about what they're actually seeing, because there's no way you can hide it from them. I think to be able to try to help them understand, they have so much access and they know so much, but do they understand what they know? And I think that's the role of the parent, to help them understand and make sense of the information that they're being exposed to.
Right.
You know?
And that also gives them an opportunity between the parent and the child to develop a closer relationship and a connection. Exactly. But also, Eric, I just mentioned about the cutoff age. Do you think there should be a cutoff age for, you know, I know some of my kids out there might be very upset about me saying this, but would there be a cutoff age with some of the things that we are exposing our kids to?
I'm not sure if, like I said, I'm not sure if we can totally prevent them from being exposed to it. I mean, we can, you know, not have a computer in the house, but like I said, if they go to their neighbor's house or they go down the street, they may have access to it. So I think it's about really helping them understand and helping them feel safe enough and comfortable enough with you as a parent to be able to talk to you about it. And if you as a parent don't understand it, that's your job to understand it and to learn about it so that you can really have an honest and safe dialogue with them. I think the goal is to make the conversation safe so that they don't feel that there's something to hide or to be ashamed about, or that there's going to be a punitive response to the information that they know. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, so definitely I understand that part. So just to ensure that our parents understand it as well, that it's that relationship that you develop and that connection, as you indicated earlier, that, you know, one would have with a child.
And having honest, open dialogue about what they're getting and where they're getting their information from.
And I think what it is also, Eric, is that, you know, for us growing up, you know, I know in my culture, being Guyanese, and my parents were very strict, and, you know, there was, I mean, we didn't have the internet and social media back then, but there were certain things growing up in our time that it's very difficult. So when you learn that behavior from parents, like someone like myself, you know, might tend to sort of like carry that pattern that the parents taught us. But for myself, I mean, I try to keep an open mind with the kids that I work with, you know, from our community center back home. And I pay attention to their Facebook responses and stuff like that. And if I see something, I do make mention to it.
And I think that's something that parents can do too. To, you know, certainly not feel like you're invading your child's privacy, but to be aware of what is your child putting on the internet. Look at the language they're using, and look at the language that children are using in response to them. Are they being bullied online, or are they bullying online?
Right.
You know, that's something to look at. Look at the language that's being presented back and forth online, because I really think that there's a lot of information in that.
Okay, just a quick question here, Eric. From a mental health perspective, and especially when we're dealing with cultures, Caribbean cultures, Indian cultures, you know, and especially, you know, many of us and our parents migrated here to the United States, and it might be difficult for some of the parents to articulate the message or the communication to the kids. Now, when a child might be crying out for help, you know, what can we tell our audience that might be viewing this right now from other cultures that, like I said, might not be able to know how to articulate that conversation piece that we're talking about with that child? What might be some of the things that we might be looking for? Like, what can we tell them? So,
what can we tell parents?
Yeah.
I think that if, as a parent, you're feeling...
Some of the warning signs that, you know...
Warning signs, what to look out for?
Yeah.
I think that to look out for, number one, what is the language your child is using? Is your child isolating in his room or her room? Is there a lot of emotional outbursts, a lot of crying, a lot of anger, a lot of fighting? If your child is getting into a lot of fights, if your child doesn't have a lot of friends, that's another warning sign. Child could be being bullied and is afraid and is ashamed, or could be a bully. Right. And you know, and the result of the root of bullying is fear. So if your child is lonely or isolating, you want to look out for that. You want to look out for the kinds of friends that they have and what they're putting online. If you can become friends with your child on Facebook, do that. Right.
Now, as we begin to wrap up, I appreciate your time coming here and for us to create this dialogue. And we will continue this on another segment. But one last question before we bring this to a close. Earlier when we opened up this dialogue today on social media, internet, and the bullying amongst our youth, I mentioned 2 earlier cases where social media can influence suicide-related behavior. The one that I mentioned to you, the case that happened in Guyana. But as I said before, that was not... enough evidence was not produced, or at that time in 2009, no one was calling this cyberbullying. As you know, because of social media, we're now recognizing things like that as cyberbullying, whereby the young man from Rutgers University, Tyler Clementi, committed suicide. Now, my question to you is, from a mental health perspective, working with young people, would you say social media can influence suicide-related behavior?
Well, I think it certainly can be a forum in which to cry out for help. If you're experiencing, or a child is experiencing a lot of mental anguish, but doesn't feel that they can go to anyone. That's why I think it's so important for parents to really be honest with their kids and to really talk to them and to really be mindful of their behavior, so that it doesn't revert to having to post something online or something on Twitter and then it's too late.
Right. Now, as we're coming to a close, one of the things that the message that I think it's very important, and Eric will agree with me because we've had several conversations on this, it's very important as parents and as caregivers of some of the children, because you might be a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle that might be caring for a young child. It's very important to listen to your instincts. And one of the things that I've told many of my kids, and this is something I came across last year when we were doing our youth conference in Guyana, I asked our kids what was a 4-letter word that a parent can give to you. And everyone, you know, said love, L-O-V-E. But one of the things I think is very important, I'd like to get this message across today, it's very important for our kids. The 4-letter word is love, but the most important thing is time. If we can give our kids enough time, you know, it's not about the timing for, you know, it's the quality of time that you provide. So on that note, again, Eric, I really want to thank you so much for this opportunity. And please check out CADVA's website, www.cadva.org. And Eric, your site is?
www.ericstonelcsw.com. And you could email either one of us, I guess, if you need some extra support or follow-up.
Right.